The oil and gas industry, the home of innovation, cutting-edge technology, and the extraordinary people who make it all happen. Together, we're powering the world. Here are the stories of business builders who are leading the way in the energy sector. This is Zebra Marketing Solutions Oil and Gas Business Builders Podcast, where we explore the real experiences of today's leaders in business growth with key takeaways to start implementing right now in our own companies. And now here is your host, Laura Camrath.
Hi, welcome to the Oil and Gas Business Builders Podcast. Welcome to our guest, Brett Chell. How are you today, Brett?
Good, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Doing well. That's good to hear. Welcome to all of our listeners in the United States and Canada and around the world. Thanks for joining us today. And we're going to have an interesting discussion this morning with Brett. Brett is a serial entrepreneur. He started out in drilling and oil and gas. He started out on the rigs, just like me. In fact, I started out on the rigs as well, working with Schlumberger. So let me just give everybody an introduction. I'm going to read through Brett's bio to give everybody a background on his experience and a little bit about what brought him to where he is now. So Brett is the president, CEO, and co-founder of Cold Bore Technology. He has more than 20 years of international experience in the oil and gas industry and specializes in developing disruptive technologies, new processes, equipment, and software systems for the drilling and completion sector. He has expertise in drilling operations and technology and has built, commissioned, and operated both conventional and coil tubing configurations. Having started in the field working on drilling rigs, Brett's background is rooted in practical deployment and creating disruptive solutions that are focused on real-world applications that reduce workload, infrastructure, and cost. After his time in the field, Brett spent the following decade building startups and perfecting the art of step financing using combinations of private equity, non-institutional and institutional capital to fund these ventures. Having already raised more than $50 million for various energy and aerospace projects, Chell moved his focus to spearhead oil and gas technology companies' creation. In the years that followed, Brett co-founded Cold Bore Technology, EBS, and Raptor Rig, which recently introduced the world's first fully automated drilling and CT rigs into North America and the Middle East markets. Cold Bore Technology provides the world's largest oil and gas companies with the Smart Pad, a completions master control system, or CMCS. This control and automation platform creates one network, one workflow, and one standard platform on location that all services are connected to. This interconnectivity of service company control systems allows autonomous fracturing operations and data capture and aggregation. One control system to run your well completions. Cold Bore Technology was awarded first place in the Venture Stream competition hosted by the Haskell School of Business, Hunter Center for Entrepreneurship and Innovation, and the University of Calgary in February 2017. In October 2018, the Rice Investment Group became one of Cold Bore Technology's largest investors. Wow. So that's pretty awesome. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to where you are now, Brett.
Probably the biggest factor is that I'm completely and 100% unemployable. So yeah, it's that would definitely be it. You could ask my teachers in high school. You could ask anybody I worked for before I started all this, but that's it. Honestly, I just my whole family actually right back to my grandma and my grandpa in a small town in southern Alberta here. Everybody was an entrepreneur. It's just what we know. Like my mom, my dad, my mom's two sisters, my grandparents on both sides, both all own their own businesses. Like my grandpa was in the small town was the butcher and my grandma was the florist. And I mean, they weren't called entrepreneurs back then. They didn't consider that. They just had a business and did that. And then I got 3 or 4 uncles, some very successful. They've run, a couple uncles. One's run a multi-billion-dollar fund, and another one's had oil and gas companies they exited, and that's all they built themselves. And so I think honestly, it's just, we didn't know anything else. And I'm terribly disinterested in school and learning. So that's it. You go work.
And yet you're receiving awards from schools.
Yeah, that's a funny one. I always find that a bit odd. It actually gives me anxiety to go back into schools. So that was an interesting one. The Haskayne School of Business giving me an award was kind of very humbling, but very odd for me. I was like, wow, I bet no one saw that one coming. Yeah. So yeah, it's just a love of business, and I just I like doing things. I can work harder when I'm incentivized to get rewarded, and I'm very driven that way. I'm not driven from a collegiate standpoint of just wanting to learn more knowledge, which a lot of people are. It's just not me.
Okay.
Yeah, so that what started it for sure.
Awesome. So you started out on the rigs, working on the rigs. So what were you doing on the rigs in your early days?
Yeah, well, so right out of high school, I went to the Emily Carr School of Fine Arts in Vancouver. So I was going down go to post-secondary, and art school was always, I'm an artist now, but that was the obvious one because I didn't have to really do anything, just paint pictures. But I figured out that art school is a lot more than that. So that only lasted a little while, and then I went to the patch right away because I wanted to start earning money. I mean, we were young men, like 19, 20 years old, and everybody was starting to earn cash around me. And I was from Southern Alberta, and back then that was boom time for oil and gas. So it was like what everybody did, right? And so I did that, and then I was on drilling rigs. So any kind of configuration, a lot of different rigs. I spent a lot of time on coils in Southern Alberta and then in northern states. And so coils and then conventional singles. So usually smaller rigs, not triple size stuff that kind of sits around. We were on fast hole, hard working, sometimes 2 rig moves a day kind of drilling. So it was, that was if you're going to cut your teeth anywhere in the oil and gas industry, I'd say service rigs and those type of fast hole and drilling rigs are probably some of the worst work.
Yeah. Awesome. Yeah, I started out myself working for Schlumberger, mostly offshore Gulf of Mexico, and did a little bit of onshore Gulf Coast and onshore, like up in the Dakotas and Montana. And they actually sent me to the North Slope of Alaska for like 5 weeks, which was actually pretty neat. But
you did all the cool stuff. So you went the other way. You went to like the big rigging, cool offshore North Slope.
Yeah. I
went straight to southern Saskatchewan and fast hold in 35-degree weather, or right on the border, Fox Creek or Fox Lake, Wabasca. In -50. That's what it was called. The town was called Wabasca, and it was like -50.
Oh my God.
Dark for 2 months straight, and just the worst.
Yeah. Well, it definitely teaches you, I mean, really what the oil and gas industry is about, really seeing it from the ground up like that is pretty neat.
Yeah. And you get a level of experience and appreciation and understanding for the industry that you will not get anywhere else. Like you can't learn that in a school. And it does carry through into the boardrooms now. You really notice when you mentioned that you did that there's definitely at least 50 or 60% of the time you notice some change in body language or how people are listening to you with people around the room when they know you've spent time in the field.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about cold bore. You've got a couple of startups that you're currently running. Are they in the startup phase, or tell me a little bit about how you came up with the idea, how you have built these businesses, and kind of what you're doing with them now and where they're headed.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, like you said in the intro there, I'd worked with a group when I first got started, when I got out of the field. I worked with a group to learn financing and all that stuff. And we did a bunch of various tech companies, weren't all necessarily oil and gas related, but learned the ropes about how to build them there. And then started Cold War Technology, and then joined a group. There was 4 of us for Raptor Rig, kind of around the same time, 2014, 2015. Cold War, I was running, doing the conceptualization for. That was my business. Raptor Rig, I was brought in to work with partners that I worked with previously in the field to help build some financial narratives and step financing. Whereas the guys who were designing the rigs were my bosses 10 years ago. So that company was how I got involved with Raptor Rig. That one, consequently, through the pandemic, it's still in a bit of contention, but it essentially got stepped on by a larger partner. I won't say any names, it's going to go public. So I'll just say that. So it was one of the victims of the pandemic, unfortunately, through some, technical finance issues with the larger partners that we had. But yeah, that it happens. You don't win them all. But the technology was really cool and is still working in the field. So that's kind of that situation. The Cold War one, still we run daily, and it's going the other way. So, I'm blessed in that sense that we had one kind of get stepped on and one take off. And Cold War, we founded, I'd say 5-6 years ago now. And we started out developing acoustic drilling tech in 2015. That's what we knew, right? We were drilling guys. And then when the recession hit, how many have we been through now in a row? First recession. What are we on, like the 3rd in a row now? Or now coming out of? But when the first recession hit in 2016, we were a year-old company, and we'd spent the first couple of million. We bootstrapped, and we're, great product for drilling already, but just no one cared. So we, at that point, had to wholesale pivot the company and just basically drop everything we had done. Lost a bunch of board members, lost a bunch of faith in the investors, but turned and went straight over to completions. And that was how we went from drilling to completions 6 years ago. Okay. And so that was the foray. And now, obviously, that is the blessing in disguise, because I think the reason why Cold War is successful today is that, and why we're essentially standalone in a very important and fast growing part of the business, is that we were drilling guys. Yeah. And we came to a completions location and had a look at it from the eyes of a drilling rig hand. And it was obvious that, the way everyone was going about it was just very traditional, and that's the box they had thought in. And so they were trying to apply solutions all around that box. And when we looked at it, we're like, there's a better way to do this wholesale. Like, you can change the whole process.
Wow. Yeah, that's really interesting. Just how bringing somebody in like you guys coming into the completions arena and, just looking at it from a different angle and coming up with that idea, that's a really interesting point, and probably something that some of our listeners can take away, that, it might be a good idea to have somebody, when you're stuck in the view that you have, sometimes it can be hard to see what you need to see to improve it or make it better. So, possibly bringing in somebody who can see it from a different angle, might be able to help with innovation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think diversity is one of the strongest, models a business can employ. If you're oil and gas specific, if you have a guy or girl that are very experienced in completions, and then a couple that really know drilling, and a couple that really know MWD, and one that was a land guy, and then a girl who did geophysics for a long time, and just not a bunch of drilling guys or girls together trying to solve problems. Typically, that's where you start to think outside the box, because it's all related, right? Yeah. The completing of a well from start to finish is all one process, really. It's just that we've siloed it up so much. You have drilling, they don't talk to completions. They don't talk to drilling. And production, that's their own thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Interesting. So Cold War is going well. It's going strong. Where do you see that heading?
Yeah, so Cold War is going really well. We've experienced, we've kind of been doubling our growth every year for the last 2 years, and even in the pandemic last year, we basically got shut down for a quarter and right in the middle of our momentum, which typically isn't good for a growth company. So, and to answer your other question, I wouldn't say we're definitely not a startup anymore. We've crossed over pretty firmly into commercial company where we have a growth equity round we're doing right now with some of the larger players, doing, doubling our revenue every year in the millions. And so it's definitely out of that bag into the commercial space. But I think more importantly is that Cold War as a company certainly does its, we do what we do, and we have a product, which I guess maybe would be good to just touch on here from 50,000 feet quickly. But our product and service we put in, so we're a platform company, software, right? But we're also hardware. We recognized as field guys coming into this application that there was a different problem in completions that was not being addressed. And it can't be addressed just by software. It's an on-premises problem, right? And so the industry was really looking at it like, oh, we can apply different solutions in the cloud and analytic, and then allow them to visualize what's going on pad, right? And that's where a lot of our competition lives. Almost everybody is up there in the cloud. They don't have on-prem presence. And so with SmartPad, the branding is SmartPad, but its technical term is a completions master control system. So it's literally that. And so what we recognized as drilling guys, when we went onto that location and we saw what they're trying to do, the real problem everyone was addressing at the time was we don't have visibility, oil and gas companies. We can't see what's going on remotely, and we don't have those eyes into our operation. So naturally the industry went analytics. Let's build a platform up here. Just get them to send us data and we'll visualize it. And as drilling guys, we knew that we had companies like Pason and NOV that developed products for the drilling industry that were electronic drilling recorders. And they would sit on a rig, just a computer, and it would gather all the data. It would show what's important to the driller and database the rest. That's essentially the methodology that was brought over to completions. All the service companies have computers. Let's just get them to send us the data and we'll visualize it and database the rest. Problem is, drilling has one company on location, the drilling rig. That's one timeline to track. So the context of everything is fairly clear, right? So all the raw data from all over the place, it's fairly clear because there's only one timeline. Frac, the process of frac went from one well on one pad to massive pads with 4, 8, 10, 12 wells with 8 or 10 companies zipper fracking. And so there's 8 or 9 companies with 8 or 9 timelines that are all a piece of a timeline that have different formats, capturing data all over the place manually, no standardization, however they want, and they're all doing their own thing, siloed, and then sending all that up to the cloud like that. And the oil company's looking at it trying to go,
what on earth is going on?
Basically, right? And so for the last 3-4 years, those analytic platforms have really proliferated, but now it's on the decline because now the intelligence curve of the industry has caught up to it and said, whoa, hold on. Now that we can see all this, there's so many problems here, we don't even know how to figure it out. And so that's where we as drilling guys, when we came onto that location 4 or 5 years ago, we had the context of that drilling rig with the one timeline. And we asked them, we were on location with another tool actually. And I said to the guy on a Chell location, where is your EDR or ECR? So in drilling, I had the EDR, electronic drilling recorder. I said, where's your ECR on a frac site? And what I meant by that was, where's your centralized master control system that connects all these services on location, has bidirectional communication, organizes all your data, where do you see it and run everything like your master control? And I went from site to site to site to site, and I couldn't believe it. I was like, it doesn't exist.
Wow.
They just kept saying, go talk to frac.
Oh my God.
I'm like, well, yeah, that's one service out here. It's important, but that's only one. How do you guys run this? And the answer was, the oil company doesn't.
Wow.
The services run it, basically. Right.
Wow.
And so that was it. Then we're like, hey, look, this is it. This is the opportunity right here. It's going to go the way of the analytics because they're cheaper and easier to do for a couple of years. And then people are going to realize that data is no good. And then it's going to tail off. And our large investment in putting the infrastructure in place to do this will pay off on the backside. Right. And that's what we gambled on.
Wow.
And that's where we're seeing the growth now.
Yeah, that's great. Awesome.
Yeah.
So, so through all this experience, do you have any advice to give our listeners, especially in the current, climate and environment well, I don't know if we're post COVID, but, having come through this whole COVID and another downturn, and a pretty drastic downturn this time, especially after companies have, already been through the last downturn and already were probably stretched. And, now we're kind of seeing oil prices come back up. And I think a lot of people are still sort of holding onto their hats, trying to see what's going to happen. But, do you have any advice? Just, COVID or not COVID related, or just about successes or challenges you experienced in your the businesses you've grown? Anything you can share?
Yes, actually, something given your context that you set there is very relevant right now. Like, around, are we mid COVID, through COVID? Where are we at? Like, I don't know. What comes to mind immediately, you can always answer that question 1,000 different ways, but what comes to mind immediately is that a lot of people, if you're starting a business or in a business that's new, or you're thinking about when to jump or make a move, they're really trying to anticipate timing, right? Like, that is what I think that's what stops most people from starting businesses, and or is most people's apprehension, is the time. Am I going to hit the market right when it's on the right upswing, right? And that's the number one consideration they have, really. And then they're like, then I'll worry about my product, and then we'll worry. And to some degree, that's true. Obviously, if you can time stuff right and you're that smart, that you're an economist, that you can figure this stuff out, great. All the power to you. I think the median of people are not that. And so they'd be taking a best guess or talking to their friends and try to get an idea of what's happening. When we started Cold War, it was 2015. At that time, we kind of had a dip already. And I had thought, well, here's, the usual cycle. We hit a dip and it's going to come back, and let's go now while it's going down. Warren Buffett's famous old adage, go in when the cranes are down and get out when the cranes are up. Mm-hmm. Right. And so I was like, let's get in now while we can raise money, have no competition, build through the down cycle, have a product ready for the up cycle, and hit the market. And we thought I was like, oh, we're going to nail this. That was with Raptor and Cold War and everything. And I thought coming out of 2016, 17, we'd hit it. Oops. So then another recession, then a kind of recovery, then a pandemic, then a kind of, you know what I mean? Yeah. And so there's this. And so what I learned through all of this, and I'm, I'm more experienced in this, and I talk to people about it that are experienced and have done multiple businesses and exited successfully. I wouldn't worry so much about that, about timing and all this stuff. Just get to work, run conservatively, make sure you get a product that has a bunch of different benefits to the operator, because single benefits don't work anymore. Like, try to think of products or services that have infrastructure reduction, safety, efficiency, automation, some element of all of those. And then you've got a better shot now, because it's so much tougher than it used to be. Mm-hmm. You can't just pick one and be like, I'm going to have a very niche application anymore. But don't worry so much about the timing. It's about persistence and being able to weather the storm time and time again, see what's happening, make quick adjustments, adapt. And when you see something happen that changes, if your path was this way and the world changed angle on you, and that path's not going to work anymore, if you're intelligent enough to see that, the next biggest thing is to act on it quick. Turn. You're going to face resistance. You're going to face your board being apprehensive, all that, but turn and commit and go. Mm-hmm. And so I think that I've heard more and more stories from people that are in my network now that have exited successfully multiple times, that's what they had to do. And very few that were like, I waited and I waited and I waited and I timed it perfect and I started my company and I sold it at the top. Right? So yeah. I think that's right now, that could be the most important information for people starting.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Sounds good. So thank you for the advice. I'm sure that was useful for all of our listeners. I wanted to also ask you, do you have any books, resources, thought leaders, what's been influential or who's been influential for you that you could share with us?
Yeah, so I am a big reader, but I like poli-sci, I like physics, and I like science, I like stuff like that. So it's not reading books. I'm not a big business book reader, but I do consume a lot of content online, audio, video, all that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably mainstream, some of the mainstream guys like Gary Vaynerchuk. Gary Vaynerchuk, and he's VaynerMedia, obviously. And then Andy Frisella, he's First Form. It's a supplement company. I think he's out of Missouri. But these are guys that are entrepreneurs that, like Andy was selling supplements out of the back of his car for like 10 years or something, or like a little tiny shop. Mm-hmm. And everyone was like, oh, you're never going to make it. Why are you doing this? Selling protein powder. And now he has this astronomically massive business where, so he talks a lot about the lessons of growing through that. And Gary, same thing, right? Wine Library TV, he started selling wine on YouTube, and when YouTube had like no viewers, like 15 years ago or 12 years ago. And he just was committed to it. And now he's like a media mogul, like everyone knows who he is. Yeah. So I follow a lot of guys like that because regardless of what industry they're in, if you just listen to what they're saying listen to what they're saying, not really, or listen to how they're saying it and what they're talking about as opposed to this specific topic. Yeah. And kind of why they're saying stuff like that. It's always the same kind of thread, right? Regardless of what industry these guys are in. And I try to emulate that because these guys are staying power type guys, right? And if you can adjust and stay in the game long enough, no matter what you're in, you'll make it. Yeah. Awesome. Yeah. Very different approach than most people probably have on this podcast that are much smarter than me, that read a ton of books on philosophers or have collegiate backgrounds. That'd be a very different approach.
It takes all kinds. So yeah. It's been really great having you on the show, and really interesting discussion, interesting experience. I'm glad you were able to share your experiences with us, and I'm sure everybody can benefit from hearing about your background. And it's not just about going to school, it's also about real world experience, and clearly you've got that and have done very well with it. So that's pretty awesome. And I wish you great success with Cold Bore and all of your businesses. And I think it's a really interesting idea, and I'm glad to see, glad to hear that it's growing the way it is and doubling in size annually. That's pretty exciting, especially in this climate. So.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I love it. I really appreciate you having me on and taking the time. I love to share as much as I can, because I think I think more people now, especially with what's going on in this world, and the blue collar types, I guess, like me, need a different option and different route to know. And if they see that, and not that I'm anywhere near where I want to be, but it is possible to grow and scale fairly large businesses on different routes. Not that any one is right. It's just, but there are a lot of options out there. You just got to put the work in, right? And it happens for sure. Yeah. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being on the show, Brett. Can our listeners find you? Where can they find you? On LinkedIn, or do you have a website? Where can they reach you?
Yeah, you bet. We have Instagram for coldboretechnology.com. I'm on LinkedIn as well. We have a business page on LinkedIn, and then I have all the usual social media stuff too.
Awesome. All right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Brett. I appreciate you. And thanks to all of our listeners for tuning in. And please check us out on YouTube. And I guess we're on all the podcast channels. So check us out on your favorite one, and tune in to our next episode. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Laura.
Thanks.
Thanks for listening to Zebra Marketing Solutions Oil and Gas Business Builders podcast. Join our Oil and Gas Business Builders groups on LinkedIn and Facebook, and see our videos on YouTube and on ogbbmedia.com. Visit zmsenergymarketing.com to learn more about how we can help you and your business design and implement a marketing strategy to retain and attract customers, grow revenues, and gain market share. Join us on the next episode for more great takeaways from business builders who are leading the way in the energy sector.